Saturday, October 11, 1913.
We were able to give you only a very brief account last evening of our visit to the home of our instructor on account of the shortness of time. We will now continue and relate some of our experiences in that region. It is a region where there are many such institutions, and they are mostly devoted to the study of the best way of helping those on earth who are in doubt and perplexity as to the problems which stretch out into the realms beyond. You will be able, by meditation, to amplify our own instruction if you view the place and our experience there in the light of a parable. So we pass on to other scenes, and will describe them as well as we can. Our guides led us to a place outside the boundary of the estate of which we have already spoken, and we found that the grassland was very extensive. It is one of those plains of heaven where manifestations from the higher heavens are sometimes given. The call goes forth and vast multitudes assemble, and then some of the glories of the higher spheres are manifested, as well as is possible in these lower realms. We passed over this tract until we at length began to ascend, and presently found ourselves on a tableland, where there were several buildings scattered about, some larger than others. In the centre was a large structure, and this we entered and found ourselves in a large and spacious hall, the only compartment in the place. It was circular in shape, and round the walls were carvings of a curious kind. We examined them and found that they were representations of the heavenly bodies, and one was the earth. But they were not fixed, but turned on pivots, half in and half out of the wall. There were also models of animals and trees and human beings, but they were all movable, and mostly stood on pedestals in niches or alcoves. We inquired the meaning and were told that this was a purely scientific institution. We were taken up to a balcony on one side of the circular space. It projected somewhat, and so we could see the whole at once. Then we were told that a small demonstration would be made for our benefit in order that we might get some idea of the use to which these things were put. We sat there waiting, and at length a blue mist began to fill the central space. Then a ray of light swept round the hall and rested on the globe which represented the earth. As it hovered about it, the sphere appeared to absorb the ray and became luminous, and after a time, the ray being withdrawn, we saw the earth globe was shining as from within. Then another ray was sent onto it of a deeper and different kind, and the globe slowly left the pedestal, or pivot, or whatever it rested on, and began to float out from the wall. As it approached the center of the space, it entered the blue mist and immediately on contact began to enlarge until it became a great sphere glowing with its own light and floating in the blue space. It was exceedingly beautiful. Slowly, very slowly, it revolved on its axis, evidently in the same way the earth does, and we were able to see the oceans and continents. These were flat patterns, like those on the terrestrial globes used on earth. But as it revolved they began to assume a different aspect. The mountains and hills began to stand out, and the waters to sway and ripple, and presently we saw minute models of the cities, and even details of the buildings. And still more detailed grew the model of earth, till we could see the people themselves, first the crowds and at last the individuals. This will be hard for you to understand, that on a globe of some, perhaps, 80 to 100 feet in diameter we were able to see individual men and animals. But that is part of the science of this institution, the enabling of these details being seen individually. Still more distinct grew these wonderful scenes, and, as the globe revolved, we saw men hurrying about the cities and working in the fields. We saw the wide spaces of prairie and desert and forest and the animals roaming in them. And as the globe slowly circled we saw the oceans and seas, some placid and others tossing and roaring, and here and there a ship. And all the life of earth passed before our eyes. We looked at this a long time, and our friend who belonged to this settlement spoke to us from below where we sat. He told us that what we were looking at was the earth as it was at that moment. If we wished he would now show us the retro-progress of the ages from the present time to the beginning of man as an intelligent being. We replied that we would indeed be glad to see more of this wonderful and beautiful phenomenon, and he left us to go, I suppose, to the apparatus by which these things were controlled. I may here pause to explain a matter which I see is in your mind. The place was not dark, it was light everywhere. But the globe itself shone with such extra intensity that, without any unpleasant sensation whatever, it obscured everything which was outside the blue cloud, which cloud seemed to be the circumference of the radiating beams shed by the globe. Soon, then, the scenes began to change on the revolving sphere, and we were taken back through the thousands of years of the life of the earth, and the generations of men and animals and plant life, which had been from the present to the ages when men were just emerging from the forest to settle in colonies on the plains. Now, I must explain here that history was not followed as historians follow it. These phenomena were not of nations and centuries, but of eons and species. The geologic periods passed before us, and it was intensely interesting to watch what men called the Iron Age and the Stone Age, the Ice Age, the floods, and so on. And those of us who understood enough to follow it noticed that these ages were rather arbitrarily named. For the Ice Age, for example, might correctly describe the state of things in one or two regions of the Earth, but there was by no means ice everywhere, as we saw as the sphere evolved. Also, we noticed that very frequently one continent was in one age and another continent in another age at the same time. The exhibition ended, however, when the Earth was well progressed, and, as I have said, the advent of man was already an accomplished fact. When we had satisfied our eyes for a while looking on the beauty of this many-colored and ever-changing jewel, and had realized that this was indeed no other than the old Earth we thought we knew so well, and found we knew so little, the globe gradually became smaller and floated back to the niche in the wall, and then the light faded out from it and it looked like an alabaster carving, just as we had seen it at first set there as an ornament. We were so interested in what we had seen that we questioned our kind guide, and he told us many things about this hall. The Earth sphere which had just been used could be made to serve other purposes than the one we had seen, but that had been selected because its picturesqueness was suited to us who were not scientifically trained. Among other uses was that of illustrating the relation of the heavenly bodies one to another, and their evolution into their present state. In this, of course, the globe we had just seen played its appropriate part. The animals about the walls were also used for a like purpose. One would be vivified by these powerful rays and brought forth into the center of the hall. When so treated, it could walk of itself like a live animal, which it was, temporarily, and in a certain restricted way. When it had ascended a platform in the center space, then it was treated with the enlarging rays, as I may call them, not knowing their scientific name, and then with others which rendered it transparent, and all the internal organism of the animal became plainly visible to the students assembled. Those who were of that settlement said that it was a very beautiful sight, to see the whole economy of the system of animal or man at work so displayed. Then it was possible to bring over the living model a change, so that it began to evolve backward, or should I say evolve, towards its simpler and primal state as a mammal, and so on. The whole structural history of the animal was shown in that lifelike process. And often when the first period of its separate existence as a separate creature was reached, the process was reversed, and it passed through the different stages of development, this time in their correct order and direction, until it became again as it is today. Also, it was possible for any student to take charge and continue the development according to his own idea, and this not of the animals alone, but of the heavenly bodies, and also of nations and peoples, which are dealt with in another hall, however, specially adapted to that study. It was a student from one of these establishments, in this same region, who erected the globe in the children's garden, of which I told you. But that is, of course, a much simpler affair, or so it appeared to us after visiting this colony of beauties and wonders. That will have to suffice for this time, although there is a lot more we saw while there. But I must not start off again, or I shall be keeping you too long. You have a question? Yes, I was present on Monday at your study circle. I knew she saw me, but could not make her hear me. Good night, dear. We shall be with you tomorrow.